Hello and welcome to State of the Project Meros. I am your host Cryptosi and I am joined by Kayaba, the lead developer. For those of you who have not watched this podcast before, this is where we delve into all of the development goings on within the Meros project. And once it's completed its development, I guess we'll delve into all the things that happen inside the Meros ecosystem. But for now, it's just development until everything gets launched. So, Kayaba, um, without any further to do, how are you, sir?
Been a bit busy recently. Unfortunately, not with Meros, so it's been a bit of a quiet month. But making progress. Got back to Meros recently, and it's good work in my opinion.
Excellent. It seems like we have solved our technical difficulties from last month, which is great. So I'll be keeping an
hmm
eye out for that. So hopefully we won't have any more of those shenanigans, and we can get cracking. So
Sounds good.
the first question I wanted to ask was about GitHub, and it was
Sure.
a commit from only a few days ago actually, and it was to fix an infinite loop caused by impossible transactions, I believe.
hmm
Um, could you explain, please?
Impossible transactions are exactly that. Transactions impossible that Meros is too stupid to realize are impossible. So with Meros, we can have a transaction, and Cryptosi, let's say it's sending $5 to you. Okay?
Mhm.
And I can have another transaction and it sends $10 to you. You can then create a transaction spending those and you'll have $15 in your pocket. I mean, you'll have $15 just because I sent them to you, but if you want to send them to a different wallet of yours, you can send them again and have $15 in your other wallet. But one of the key attacks in cryptocurrency is a double spend. You can send $15 to your own wallet from the 15 I sent you across two different inputs, or you can send that $15 to someone else, or you can do it at the same time. And with the double spend attack, if you do it at the same time, you're trying to get your merchant or other party to say, hey, this person sent me $15, it's all good, while you actually keep the money by sending it to yourself. And that's just a very traditional double spend attack. And with Meros, what we have is we have node or merit holders, merit being its own voting system, its whole thing. We have them vote on which transaction to continue with. But when Meros tracks the transaction, it doesn't process any voting. It just says, "Hey, there's a transaction, and we want it to exist." Great. So let's say you actually don't need two inputs; you just need the one. So Cryptosi, if I send you $5, you can create a transaction that spends it, and you just move your $5 to another wallet of your own. So we have the transaction from me to you, and the transaction from you to yourself that spends my transaction to you. An impossible transaction is when you create or it's at least what I call it because that's just what I call it. It's when you create a double spend that requires its own competitor in order to be valid. So if I send you $5 Cryptosi and you send it to yourself, you can then create a double spend where you send the $5 to yourself but to a different wallet. And you can make it impossible by double spending it with $10. I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. Kind of want to have a whiteboard here. So there's the $5 from me to you, and you spend that twice. You spend that once to wallet A and once to wallet B. But the transaction to wallet B is actually worth 10 Meros because not only do you take the $5 from myself, but you take the $5 you sent to wallet A as well. And that's impossible because in order for the transaction to wallet B to finalize, it needs the transaction to wallet A to finalize. In order for the transaction to wallet A to finalize, it needs to spend the funds I sent to you. If it spends the funds I sent to you, wallet B can't finalize because it's a double spend and spends the same funds. It's really weird. It would look much better if I had a whiteboard available. But basically, it's you create a double spend, but the double spend spends funds that you sent to yourself in a different transaction, and it's never going to verify because it. takes funds that it competes with by nature. And Meros isn't smart enough to pick this up. I didn't write detection into Meros to pick this up. Instead, I just said, there's no way it will finalize. We have the voting system and this whole thing, but there's no way it will verify. It will say, well, this transaction can't be valid because it has a parent, and that parent isn't valid. So let's check if the parent is valid. And when the parent becomes valid, it invalidates. I'm not doing the best at explaining it, and I'm sorry about that. But to be clear, there's $5 to wallet A, there's $10 to wallet B, because wallet B competes by using wallet A's input, but it also moves the funds out of wallet A. Again, for wallet B to finalize, it has to have its parents finalize. For wallet B's parents to finalize, the funds in wallet A would have to finalize. For those funds to finalize, you need the money I sent to you. I'm really sucking at explaining this, and I'm sorry, and I keep restarting myself. I hope I've explained myself by now, but the point is it can't verify itself.
Yeah, it does
But I
actually make sense. But what I'm considering is, what will that mean for the network? Will it mean that the whole thing will get stuck, or what
so
will it
there is
actually
one
mean?
valid transaction here, and it's I sent you $5, you sent $5 to wallet A.
Mhm.
That's completely valid. It's just that the double spend to wallet B exists, and when you double spend to wallet B, you also took the funds from wallet A, which created an impossible cycle. Because it competes with something it relies on, and by competing with something it relies on, it can never actually finalize. Meros, even if the one transaction was voted in, even if the transaction to wallet B, which is invalid, was voted in, Meros will say, okay, the parents have to be finalized before I finalize you. And when Meros goes to check that the parents are finalized, it will come across the transaction to wallet A. It says, this Kayaba sent $5 to Cryptosi, or 5 Meros to Cryptosi. Cryptosi moved 5 Meros to this wallet. And it will say, okay, that's all good. Let's finalize that, you know? But then when it comes back to wallet B, it's going to say, no, these funds were already spent. You can't be valid. So Meros, when it actually finalizes these transactions, it finalizes them correctly. It detects that the transaction to wallet B isn't ready for finalization. And when it is ready for finalization, it's obvious it's invalid. But I didn't actually code the transaction graph to detect that in advance. In thinking about it, I could have. I don't think it would have been worth it though. I'm
How
thinking
long
about the
ago did you?
performance of such an algorithm, and the performance isn't good. The performance really isn't good when I think about implementing it. It would have very bad performance. Um, But because of that, we do have impossible transactions acknowledged by the system. Transactions which can compete with their own parents. And because they compete with their own parents, they're impossible. They'll never get verified. Um, but that also means when processing them, we have to set up a loop. We have to say check transaction A. If transaction A has all its parents finalized and handled, we can try to verify it. If transaction A doesn't have its parents finalized yet, move to transaction B. And if transaction B is ready, do whatever, then move to C, then move to D, then move to E, so on. Just go through all the transactions in the list. I had a loop, and it was just looping over the one transaction, but it was an impossible transaction. And instead of realizing it was impossible and moving on, it was, if I recall correctly, I might be misremembering the exact issue that caused this loop, but I think it was forever sitting on the impossible transaction, trying to finalize it, but saying that it couldn't be finalized. And I just had to add a case where it detects that.
Okay.
I think that was the issue. No, I'm sorry, I messed up. That wasn't the issue here. I have code for that. That is theoretically possible. I just have code for it. Um, no, so I've been working for a while now on the Epochs video. The Epochs is the exact process in which transactions are finalized, and everything is accounted and synced up. um, I've been a bit over the place. Sorry about that. So in this Epochs video, we don't track transactions directly. What we track is inputs, and the reason for that is If a transaction's a double spend, it shares inputs with another transaction. So what we do is we look at inputs and we say this input needs to finalize. 1 second, I'm sorry about this. Uh, I'm sorry, my dog's just being in utter pain right now. So what we do is we look at inputs because it's not about what transactions exist, it's about who they compete with, and the way you check for competitors is you look at what they spend. Um, And as part of that, we have a system where if a competitor appears, we actually extend the voting time of the original transaction. If a competitor appears, we give it a fair chance to exist, because else there's other attack vectors. So basically, when a competitor appears, we extend the voting time of all the transactions involved and gives them a fair chance to be voted on and discussed and so on. And when these transactions appear to be voted on, there is a risk that exists. We need to also extend the time that its children, its descendants, are voted on. So, Cryptosi, let's say I send $5 to you, and you send $5 to another wallet of yours. But I double spend. I am a bad person here, and I try to steal those funds from you. So, my transactions, they both get their voting times extended. Well, your transaction didn't have its voting time extended, which means its voting finishes before my voting finishes. But if my votes finish first, or finish after, it doesn't work out. Again, you need to have all transactions before you verified in order to verify a transaction. If your transaction's voting finishes first, my transactions aren't verified yet, and they need to be verified. So if I do a double spend, I extend the voting time, we need to bring up descendants, and your transaction is one of the descendants. The issue with an impossible transaction is it creates a circle. It it defines itself as the child of multiple groups. And because it defines itself as a child of the original transaction and something spending that transaction, which it's competing with, and that's why it's impossible. It's a whole thing. And again, I wish I had a whiteboard. I'm really not happy with myself for how I'm explaining it. But because it's defined as spending the original transaction in question and something it competes with, it's just defined as the descendant of multiple groups. And it was kind of looping over itself. It's saying, so we have this source transaction A, which is A is from me to you. I don't want to go back into the letters. I feel like I get stuck there. But the point is that it kept saying, okay, who's your children? And the children is the one possible transaction and the impossible transaction. And it goes to the possible transaction and it says, who's your child? And it says the impossible transaction. And the impossible transaction is in a group of the very original transaction. So it goes back to the original transaction and it says, who's your children? And it's an infinite loop caused by the fact it's trying to figure out everyone who's involved in the transaction or in the group of transactions. But the impossible transaction has created links that are invalid. The links can never finalize because it competes with itself by its own nature. And because of that, when you try to figure out all the transactions involved, it was causing an infinite loop because of the way I wrote one piece of this code. I wish I had a whiteboard. I'm really not happy with how I explained that. I hope I did well enough.
Yes, yes, you really did. I'm not gonna. I had a question lined up, but I'm not gonna ask it because
Sorry.
it might be quite stupid.
No, feel free to. Feel free to.
Okay, so I'm thinking, could that be uh like an attack vector of sorts? Is there a way that you could spam the network by setting loads of these infinite loops just to slow
So
things down?
it's no longer an infinite loop. Now it's handled.
Yes.
Um,
Okay.
they don't really increase the load of the network as much as any other double spend. Because any double spend does have increased processing to handle it, but an impossible transaction by nature is just another double spend. So
Okay.
it does not significantly increase the processing of that.
Okay. Next commit is an interesting one. It's to simplify get pending transactions. Um, yeah, I take it away, Kyra.
Mhm.
How did you simplify get pending transactions, and why? Why did they need simplifying?
So get pending transactions is a function in Epochs, and that deals with finalization. And as part of dealing with finalization, it tracks every pending transaction, which is every transaction that still has an active voting period. So as part of tracking the voting period, um, one of the things I'm very proud of with Meros, and one of the things that makes it very complicated, is we cache a lot of data. We all transactions that are still active, we keep in memory. We don't say, hey, hard drive, or hey, SSD, what's this data? We just have it available, we have it indexed, so on and so on. And I'm really happy with that. And I probably went overkill because database software already maintains its own cache. If you're frequently accessing data, it keeps an eye on it, so on and so on. And the advantage with Meros having its own cache, and I promise this is relevant, the advantage with Meros having its own cache is that it knows exactly what data it's going to most frequently access and can handle it on that premise. So it doesn't rely on the database trying to figure out what's being frequently accessed, but instead it just already knows what's likely to be frequently accessed and can keep an eye on it. And I'm really happy with the Meros cache, but it's actually decently complex. And as I said, one of the things we cache is pending transactions. So as we cache pending transactions, what if we boot up the node? If we just start up the node from scratch, we need to populate the cache. We need to say, hey, we have a bunch of pending transactions, let's keep it going. And the way we figure out what transactions to keep in the cache is we ask the epochs, hey, what transactions are pending? You know what votes were scheduled, you know what vote periods are still going on, what transactions are pending? And as it asks what transactions are pending, one second, regaining my train of thought here. Um, right, so as I said earlier, the Epochs doesn't actually track transactions. What it does is it tracks inputs. Because if you have competitors, you only know they're competitors because they spend the same inputs. So it tracks things by inputs. So because of that, the get pending transactions function is designed as go over every input that's still has something being voted on and grab all the transactions that spend it. And those are the transactions that are still pending. And that works. That's perfectly valid algorithm. But one of the things I did is in order to optimize the code, it was beneficial to just have a direct list of transactions. And it was relatively easy to implement a direct list of transactions. So when I implemented a direct list of transactions, which are just, hey, these are all the pending transactions, I no longer needed to say, hey, for every input, get every transaction that spends it, put it in a list and return it. I just needed to say, hey, we already have this list of pending transactions, just return those.
Ah,
So it used to be an algorithm which went over data in epochs and said, we have these inputs, therefore these transactions are pending. And now it just says, yeah, here are the pending transactions. So it was really, it's a rarely called function. It's only used on booting up and reorganizations, but it was just using a piece of data that I added instead of recalculating it.
would that make the process faster, or was it just more a code cleanup?
It's definitely a optimization. That algorithm, again, it's rarely run, and I wasn't concerned about it being expensive. But if you ask about it, yes, it is expensive.
Okay.
It's not the most expensive algorithm, and there are plenty of other things I'd be more concerned about. If you ask me, hey, how do you get Meros to be 10% faster? That is not the code I would have pointed to. But in theory, yes, it was expensive, and it's much better to use the data we already have, which is one of the things I did.
Kind of like I guess a situation where you consider every little helps. So it doesn't.
Mhm.
It's not a massive
Exactly.
optimization, but it's something that you could have fixed. Um, as I was looking through the code, and I can't pull it up now, but I hope you can. There was something on line 48 which looked like it had immediately been deleted and then re-added back there. Um, I kind of couldn't see why you would do that, and then I also couldn't understand why GitHub would keep it as a change because it seems to be the exact same code. Um, I'll put a comment. I'll put a link to the actual GitHub commit in the description below, as I always do, so that you can actually look it up yourselves. I'm talking to the listeners or watchers, not you, Kaya, because you obviously know what you did. But I was just wondering what that was about. Is that Why? What has happened there that I've missed? Because I know I must have missed
So you sent me this before the podcast, and I did look at it. It was actually had to do with the current transactions and epochs variable. So we actually have two variables for that. One is current transactions, and one is called datas. Current transactions refers to all the send transactions, transfers of value, while datas refers to data transactions. And those already had their own variable and were tracked by inputs because data transactions have magic inputs, which we talked about on our last podcast as well. Um, but I added another buffer or cache or whatever you want to call it, where it's a list of all the current transactions in epochs, and that was a separate variable just because it was an optimization while the datas one was actually necessary. And because of that, I had two variables, current transactions and datas. I just wanted the data's variable to be below current transactions because current transactions went along with the inputs variables defined above and the variables to track inputs and how they're spent, while data's was more exceptional and added on at the end. So because of that, I just wanted the order to be inputs, current transactions, datas. And I just removed the data line and moved it down. It was just a way of mentally grouping the variables.
it. I'm assuming it literally doesn't change at all the way the Meros system runs. It's not as if that it means that the Meros is going to handle them
I
in that
mean,
order.
technically it changes the binary, but no, not in any meaningful way.
Okay, so these sorts of things are just code cleanups. Are they the sorts of things that you hope will make it easier for other developers when they do come in to
Mhm.
get to grips with the code base because things are bunched together in meaningful ways, in ways that kind of
Yeah,
are
and
intuitive?
another thing I try to do is extensively comment the code base for that purpose. And also just for myself, I've walked away and not known what the heck I was looking at when I've come back.
Yes. Okay. Um, this is a good question. This is a good one. So I was looking through the issues and I thought, let's go back and see which issue has persisted and lasted the longest. And it was one from January the 22nd. Didn't say which year, so it may even have been 2020 or 2019. But
If I'm actually kind of curious in this. I'm going to pull it up myself.
mhm. I've got the link in the show notes, which I've shared with you.
All right, oldest issue I see is June 16th, 2019.
Okay, so then obviously there must have been a next page because I saw the one I saw was January. I'm sure it's January.
21st. Yes, that is page 1 of 3.
Okay. Well, somebody was obviously not
Okay, so
paying
what was the
attention.
one issue you did want to ask about? What
Right,
was the
so
issue
let's
you
just
did want
ask
to ask
about
about?
this one. We'll not go back to the. Oh no, I'll tell you what we'll do. I'll tell you what we'll do on the fly. We'll ask about this one, and then we'll go back to the furthest one, which is the one which I actually wanted to ask about, and we'll ask about
And
that
there's a
after.
typo in the title. I'm so embarrassed about that.
Is there a typo in the title? Good. Right. So, votes shouldn't require 50 votes.
Uh,
No,
There's even one older than that on the first page. That's the second oldest one on the first page. I just opened it on the same day.
that was the oldest one.
I just pulled it up. um, yeah, no, okay, so difficulty votes shouldn't require 50 votes. I feel like we've talked about this before, but
Definitely would have
basically,
done. Yes.
send and data transactions have independent difficulty filters. The difficulty, Meros is feeless, but in order to stop spam, you have to solve a small proof of work. It's a minor computer challenge. It helps keeps numbers nice and clean. If I send you 5 Meros, you can then send 5 Meros to someone else without issue. Still an extremely valid spam filter, so on and so on. But in order to handle spam attacks, one of the things that's important is that the spam filter can be raised. So if more transactions are coming in, the difficulty can rise to order to bear the curve a bit better. And while that could be raised via hard forks, that's extremely inefficient. So one of the things in the Meros protocol is merit holders, who are the people who verify transactions or vote on transactions. Everyone verifies them. Um, while they vote on transactions, they can actually raise the difficulty. And they can issue a vote, and that will raise the difficulty up or down, and that can help the network handle spam. And it also represents the load of the network. If because the way it will eventually be is no, merit holders will automatically vote when they're under sufficient load. And because of that, if merit holders upgrade their hardware, they'll vote for a lower difficulty naturally just because they can handle the load. So just the automatic voting, it's a really great feature, something I'm happy to have, or the ability to automatic vote. Right now we don't have automatic voting; we just have the ability to vote. Um, but one of the things I did when implementing it is I said you have to at least have 50 merit, and my goal there was to limit the amount of people voting, not to centralize it, but to make it more efficient. I was concerned that a lot of votes at the same time might exacerbate the spam as it was happening. But I don't think we will have enough merit holders where that itself will be an issue.
Right.
And I think it centralizes the network a decent bit. So I wanted to make that a more accessible project, or more accessible aspect of the network.
Is it something you're planning on doing before launch? Are you planning on fixing this before launch?
Yes, because it's a protocol bug, and protocol, or not protocol bugs, but it's an issue with the protocol, and issues with the protocol become much harder to fix after launching.
Which was the one that I should have been asking? Can you go and pull that up for me, please? The very
Page
first
3,
issue.
Meros doesn't use properly sized numbers. Filed June 16th, 2019.
Why have you not fixed that issue yet, Kayaba?
I actually have done a lot of work. Um, I made the issue on June 16th. The same day, I published a partial fix for it, and I corrected what still exists. Then I said the no consensus DAG branch removes. A few months later, I updated it when I worked on a branch that also changed the properties. And my note was, uh, the block header nonce. I, if I'm reading this correct, element nonces and block header nonces are the only two things left affected. I just haven't. Basically, there are numbers in the protocol. Just to explain the issue, there are numbers in the protocol, and I believe they're using integers, which are numbers like -1, 0, 1, 2, when they should be using unsigned integers of a specified size. Unsigned means they're only positive 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the specified size just means that they have a natural limit. And it's not, well, if you run it on this one computer, it's this size, but if you run it on this other computer, it might be a different size. And while the protocol does handle that sizing in that you could run it on one computer and talk to another computer and they won't error out, it's still better to use the proper data types at the source that fix the length instead of requiring the network serialization, the way it talks to other computers, to handle the size for you. So it's really a minor thing. It's a bit annoying to work with, and it's just something I didn't get around to.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it might actually be fixed for all I know, because I have done other work in this area. So it might just be bad record keeping on my end. But the last update was actually in March of 2020.
Last question. Final question,
Okay.
but it's a good one. Discord
When
channel.
mainnet.
No, no, that's actually the last question, but that doesn't really count because I kind
Okay.
of know the answer to that one, so I'm not excited about that. The Discord, the Meros has a Discord channel. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, there is a Discord channel. I always put the link in the description. Generally, you can hang around in the Discord and find some little bits of information, and just hang out with Kayaba and other cool people. Um, in there, you said that all of the tests pass on the Epochs redo.
Mhm.
What does this mean? Is this kind of like for you? Is it absolute closure? Because even though you said that, you did make a comment. I haven't got the exact thing here, but you did say something about there could
So
be
what
some
I
other
said
tests.
was the test I was running past, and what I did is I got the relevant tests up, which tested the specific behavior from NIM of the Epochs redo, which is just changing how transactions finalize. I got the NIM test, which tests very specific behavior to pass. There's this one text called the transactions test, and it just creates a ton of transactions and floods the network with them. And those transactions, that test is also extremely important to the Epochs redo, because the Epochs is about transaction finalizing. So being able to mass create transactions is extremely beneficial. That test passes around the new code. There's a couple I have yet to update. As in, there's a couple that just haven't been ported over to the new code, as it has new definitions, new functions, so on and so on. Um, those I don't see any issue with them passing. Because the existing test passed, those should without issue as well. And it's really just a good sign that the new code is solid. There's still a couple more tests I want to write from the Python side, but I would be confident saying that this Epochs code is really done, and it's just missing out on testing.
How long do you feel how long do you feel? How long did you have to spend on testing? And was the testing straightforward, or did you have some hurdles during the testing? Did they show anything up?
Testing generally takes as much time as writing the code itself. And it's very boring, it's very mediocre, and you can easily lose your train of thought. And it's not something I enjoy, and it's why I've been trying to hire a Python developer for a while.
Okay, but you got through it in the end. It was a long slog.
Still a work in progress, but almost there, yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, so now the grill time to really give you those hard questions that I know that you love, that we give you every month. Uh, when will the final testnet be, please?
So there are two major features in front of me, and then it's just bug fixes. One is the Epochs video, which we've talked about for a while, and I'm finally finishing up. And after that is checkpoints. After that, there's no other protocol features that I'm really concerned about. It's just a lot of minor bugs here and there, such as changing difficulty voting to not require 50 votes, or 50 merit. And because of that, I don't like giving out times, but I just want to say it is coming up very shortly. The Epochs redo I estimated at 2 to 4 weeks, and when it comes to time of actually worked on it, I would say it's been about 2 to 4 weeks. Checkpoints I would expect to be another 2 to 4 weeks. Testing is going to be more difficult for checkpoints. There's a lot more cases to test for. But might be, if I can keep my head down, I actually have a move coming up, and I'm a bit concerned about that. But hopefully we would be targeting September, end of September, which is always 2 months away, but it's no longer always 3 months away, which I'm happy about.
I was going to ask you something as you said that. I've forgotten now. Damn it. Damn. Okay. Oh man, really good question as well. Okay, never mind. And then when mainnet.
If the testnet goes well after that, and I expect the testnet to last a month.
Awesome. I wish I could remember what the question was I just had lined up, but it's completely gone. But Kayaba, as ever, thank you so much for your time. It's been a very informative, very interesting, and I love the
Happy to give it. I
transparency.
really appreciate you spending the time to do this, so thank you.
No, awesome. For those of you who are wondering, I'm in the warehouse. We did think that this was the root of our technical difficulties, was my home internet, but it turns out that it wasn't my fault this time. I didn't do anything
Wow, throwing that shade, huh?
wrong. Throwing that shade. So yeah, so hopefully we shall be back with the September update, which will hopefully feature completed checkpoints, or at least
Mostly.
at the mostly completed, or at the testing phase, if we can get a good run during August. August is the
Mm-hmm.
summer month for us, so we'll probably be spending a lot of time outdoors and not a lot of time indoors coding. I can accept that, however, if that turns out to be the case. Thank you very much for your time. Anybody who's made it this far, congratulations. Give yourself a pat on the back. Please make sure to like, subscribe, share, all of that stuff that everybody always asks us for, and I seem to ask for at the end. And I realize my favorite YouTubers ask at the beginning, so I want to start doing that from next time. Kayaba, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, sir. I will see you next month.
Thank you again, Cryptosi.
Cheers,
See
Kayaba.
you then.
Bye bye.